The cafe was busy that evening, as it usually was. The low hum of conversations mixed with the clinking of cups and plates. The waitress moved through the crowded tables, balancing trays carefully, her steps quiet but sure. She had been working here for years, and over time, the customers had grown used to her gentle smile, her polite nods, and her soft, unassuming presence. Nobody really paid much attention to her beyond the friendly greetings she offered. To them, she was part of the background, a familiar face behind the counter and between tables, but tonight, something felt different. There was a sense of curiosity in the air, a feeling that the ordinary could suddenly become extraordinary. It began when a man, a wealthy-looking patron who often came alone, sat in his usual corner. He had a sharp gaze and a presence that made people notice him immediately. He didn't talk much to anyone, but he watched everything carefully. As the waitress delivered his coffee, he caught sight of the old piano in the corner of the cafe. The piano was dusty and seldom used, mostly ignored. Its keys had dulled with time, and the wood was scratched and faded. But to him, it was an object of curiosity, and perhaps he thought it deserved to be played. He leaned slightly forward and called her over, his voice polite but carrying a hint of expectation. "You know," he said, "I've seen you look at that piano more than once. Why don't you play something for us?" The waitress froze for a moment. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, not like this. She had played the piano before, yes, but only in private, in quiet moments when no one could hear. She had never performed for a crowd, even one as small as this. She felt a flutter of nervousness in her chest. Her hands itched with a memory of the keys, but she hesitated, unsure whether to admit the truth. I'm not really ready," she said softly, trying to step back. The man smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It carried a challenge. "Oh, come now. Just a little something. Surely you can manage that. Everyone will enjoy it." The waitress shook her head, but the man's gaze didn't leave her. It wasn't threatening, but it carried a pressure that was hard to ignore. Around her, a few other customers had stopped their conversations. They were curious, watching the interaction unfold. The atmosphere changed. Suddenly, the cafe wasn't just a place for coffee and small talk, it was a stage. And she was the unprepared performer. Her mind raced. She didn't want to disappoint anyone, and yet the thought of playing in front of people terrified her. Her fingers twitched slightly as if remembering old movements, old songs she had played in secret. There were melodies she had imagined in her head for years, pieces that had lived only in the quiet corners of her home, never spoken aloud. Could she really play them now, under the scrutiny of strangers? The man's voice cut through her thoughts again. "Come on, just a song. I promise you'll enjoy it. Everyone here will. Think of it as a gift." A gift. That word echoed in her mind. Maybe this was her chance, she thought. Maybe this small, dusty piano in this ordinary cafe could become something more than it had ever been before. Her nerves didn't disappear, but a small spark of courage flickered inside her. She nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly. The man's expression softened slightly, satisfied, and she turned toward the piano. The walk across the cafe felt longer than it was. Every step made her heart beat faster. Patrons whispered quietly to each other, some trying to guess what she might play, others simply watching with curiosity. She reached the piano and ran her fingers lightly over the keys. They were cold and stiff, but they responded, and that gave her a small comfort. She sat down on the worn bench and took a deep breath, trying to calm the racing thoughts in her mind. For a moment, she just stared at the keys, letting her hands hover above them. Then, slowly, carefully, she pressed the first note. The sound was soft but clear, filling the corner of the cafe. She closed her eyes, letting the memory of music take over. The song began tentatively, hesitant, like a whisper that needed time to grow. And then, something happened. Her fingers moved with a grace and confidence she hadn't realized she possessed. The notes flowed smoothly, weaving a melody that was delicate yet powerful. The cafe seemed to fall silent, the usual background noise fading into nothing. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, the clinking of cups ceased. And even the man who had pressured her to play leaned forward, watching closely. Unable to look away, there was a depth to her playing that caught everyone by surprise. The music wasn't just skillful, it was emotional. It carried a story, a feeling, a sense of life lived quietly but fully. People could sense it without knowing the details. They felt the melody in their hearts, and it moved them in ways that words never could. Some of the older patrons closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, remembering forgotten memories. Younger listeners leaned forward, amazed that such a voice could come from such a simple source. The waitress, too, was surprised. She had expected fear, hesitation, and doubt. But now, as her hands danced over the keys, she felt freedom. She felt a connection to something larger than herself, something that had been waiting patiently for her to discover it. She played as if the piano and her hands had always known each other. As if this moment had been destined all along, the man who had asked her to play tried to hide his astonishment. His confident demeanor wavered, replaced by awe. He had expected a simple tune, maybe a little entertainment, but he got something far greater. The sound that filled the cafe was not just music, it was revelation. It revealed talent that had been hidden quietly. Behind soft smiles and shy gestures dot around her, the patrons reacted in different ways. Some whispered to each other, pointing out the skill and precision in her playing. Some sat in stunned silence, unsure how to react to something so unexpectedly beautiful. And some, unable to contain themselves, clapped softly, encouraging her without breaking the spell of the music. The song continued, building slowly, its melody rising and falling like a gentle wave. Each note seemed to tell a story of patience, of quiet dreams, of moments long kept secret. The waitress lost track of herself as she played, letting the music carry her. It was no longer about fear or pressure. It was about sharing something deeply personal with the world. She realized that music could speak louder than words ever could. And tonight she had found her voice. As the last note lingered in the air. The cafe remained silent for a moment, suspended in the beauty of what had just happened. Then slowly applause began to rise. It was soft at first, hesitant, and then stronger, louder, more insistent. People cheered, some stood, and others smiled in awe. The man who had pressured her to play finally looked at her, no longer with expectation or challenge, but with respect and amazement. The waitress sat back for a moment, her hands trembling slightly on her lap. She had expected nervousness, but instead she felt a quiet pride. She had stepped out of her comfort zone, and in doing so, she had revealed a part of herself that nobody had ever seen. The cafe, once ordinary and predictable, had become a place of magic, if only for a brief evening. And she had been the spark that created it. That night, as she cleaned tables and poured coffee, the whispers continued. Patrons came by to compliment her, some asking if she had studied music formally, others simply saying how moved they had been. She smiled politely, letting the words wash over her. Deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The piano had awakened something in her, and she could feel it, a quiet, persistent pull toward music, toward sharing her gift with the world, and in that moment she understood something profound. Sometimes life pushes you into situations you aren't ready for. Sometimes pressure and expectation can feel overwhelming. But sometimes, just sometimes, those moments are the ones that reveal who you truly are. The waitress had been pressured to play, yes, but in doing so, she had discovered a hidden virtuoso inside her, a part of herself that had been waiting patiently, ready to shine when the moment came. The cafe returned to its usual rhythm eventually, the customers chatting, the coffee brewing, the plates clattering. But the memory of the music lingered, echoing in the hearts of everyone who had been there. And the waitress, quietly, carried a new confidence, a new sense of purpose, and a renewed connection to something she had always loved. That evening had changed everything. Not in a dramatic way that everyone could see, but in the quiet, powerful way that only true talent and passion can dot. And so, with a gentle smile, she returned to her work, knowing that the music she had shared was just the beginning of a journey that would take her far beyond the cafe, far beyond the simple routine of her days, into a world where her talent could finally be seen, heard, and celebrated. The day after her performance, the cafe felt different. She arrived early, tying her apron and wiping down tables, but there was a new kind of attention in the air. Customers whispered quietly when they saw her, their eyes bright with curiosity and admiration. Even some regulars who had never said more than hello before nodded at her with a warmth she hadn't noticed. For the first time, she felt a subtle shift in how people saw her. She was no longer just the quiet, polite waitress who carried trays and refilled cups. She had become someone capable of surprising, of creating something beautiful. Yet, despite the attention, she tried to keep herself grounded. She moved through the cafe with the same careful precision, cleaning tables, taking orders, and serving coffee. But every now and then, her mind drifted back to the piano. She thought about the notes, the melody that had flowed so naturally, the way the music had seemed to take over her entirely. She had never felt anything like it before. Playing in front of people had been terrifying at first. But as soon as she let herself follow the music, fear melted into a feeling she could only describe as freedom. The memory of that moment stayed with her as she served drinks, and it gave her a strange, almost new kind of confidence. She caught herself smiling more openly, laughing softly with customers when they told her how wonderful her performance had been. It wasn't arrogance, far from it, but it was a quiet pride. The kind that comes when you discover something inside yourself that you didn't know existed. As the morning passed, a few customers stayed behind to chat with her about the piano. Some wanted to know if she had taken lessons, others asked if she played professionally. She answered politely, trying to be modest, but she couldn't hide the spark of excitement in her eyes. For years, her love for music had been a private thing, kept secret because she didn't think anyone would understand. But now, people were curious, and they seemed genuinely impressed. For the first time, she realized that sharing her music could bring people joy in ways she had never imagined. By midday, the cafe was packed as usual. A small group had gathered around the piano, curious if she might play again. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should avoid the attention. But something inside her stirred. She felt a quiet urge to give people a gift, to let them hear just a little more of the music that had been inside her for so long. With a soft, almost shy smile, she walked over to the piano. Her fingers brushed the keys lightly, testing the sound, and she began to play. This time, the music was different. It wasn't just about demonstrating skill, it was about telling a story. Each note carried emotion, a memory, a feeling she couldn't quite put into words. The cafe fell silent again, as it had the night before, but now there was a new layer to the atmosphere. People weren't just amazed, they were moved. Some closed their eyes, letting the music fill them completely. Others leaned closer, listening intently, as if the sound were revealing something they had forgotten about life, about joy, about hope. As she played, she noticed the man who had pressured her the night before. He was sitting quietly, leaning back in his chair, his eyes fixed on her. There was no arrogance in his gaze now, only awe. He had expected a polite tune, a simple display of ability, but what she gave him was something far more profound. He realized, as did everyone else in the cafe, that her music came from the heart. It wasn't just talent. It was a reflection of her soul, and it touched everyone who listened. The waitress felt a deep connection with her audience, even though she didn't know most of them personally. She felt their curiosity, their admiration, and their surprise, and in response she played with a tenderness that she had never allowed herself before. Music had always been her private world, a place where she could escape from the noise and stress of daily life. But now, sharing it with others brought a joy that was completely new. She realized that her gift could do more than entertain, it could inspire, console, and even heal. The song grew richer and more complex as she continued. She experimented with melodies she had never played in public, letting her creativity flow freely. Some notes were soft and delicate, others bold and expressive. The cafe seemed to transform around her. The mundane, everyday setting became a space of magic, a temporary sanctuary where music was the language everyone understood. Customers stopped checking their phones, servers paused their routines, and even the kitchen staff listened in quiet amazement. For those few minutes, everything else disappeared. When the song ended, the applause was immediate and heartfelt. People cheered, clapped, and some even whistled. The energy in the room was electric. She had never imagined that a simple song, played in a small cafe, could have such a powerful effect. The man who had encouraged her to play approached her quietly. He didn't need to say anything. His expression said it all. He was impressed, humbled, and perhaps a little ashamed that he had doubted her abilities. She smiled politely, acknowledging him without words, and returned to her tasks, her heart still racing with the excitement of the performance. After the cafe slowed down in the evening, she found herself alone for a moment. She walked back to the piano, brushing her fingers across the keys. She could still feel the energy of the day, the lingering connection with the people who had listened. She realized that she didn't want to stop here. She wanted to explore this new path, to see where her talent could take her. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream beyond the cafe, beyond the familiar routines of her life. She imagined performing in different places, perhaps even recording her music one day. The possibilities seemed endless, and the excitement was exhilarating. In the following days, news of her performance spread beyond the cafe. Some customers shared videos on social media, capturing snippets of her playing. Comments poured in, praising her talent and expressing awe. People from the neighborhood came specifically to see her, curious about the waitress who had amazed everyone with a single song. She was still the same person, quiet and polite, but the recognition she received gave her a newfound confidence. She realized that people could see her for more than just the job she did. They could see her talent, her dedication, and her passion. Despite all the attention, she remained humble. She didn't perform for praise or recognition. She performed because it felt natural, because music had always been a part of her life. But now, sharing it had shown her something important. Her music had the power to connect people, to bring them together in a shared experience of beauty and emotion. She felt a responsibility, too, to continue practicing and improving, so that she could give even more to those who listened. One afternoon, a local music teacher visited the cafe. He had heard about her talent through the growing buzz and wanted to meet her. He was impressed not only by her skill but also by her natural expressiveness and the way she connected with her audience. He offered to mentor her, to help her refine her technique and explore new musical styles. At first, she was hesitant. She wasn't sure she was ready for formal guidance. But as he spoke, she realized that this was another opportunity, another step forward. She accepted, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness, but most of all, a sense of possibility. Over the next few weeks, her routine changed. She still worked at the cafe, still served coffee and cleaned tables, but her free time became devoted to music. She practiced diligently, learning new pieces, experimenting with different melodies, and discovering her own unique style. Each day, she felt her confidence growing, her connection to the piano deepening. What had started as a reluctant performance had blossomed into a true passion, one that gave her life a sense of purpose and fulfillment she had never experienced before. The patrons continued to come, some returning specifically to hear her play, others bringing friends to witness the talent they had discovered. Each performance was different, each song a new story. People often approached her afterward, sharing how moved they had been, how her music had made them feel something they hadn't felt in a long time. And she listened, grateful for the connections, but always focused on the music itself. She played for herself, for the audience, and for the joy of creating something beautiful. Through it all, the waitress realized something profound. Life often places unexpected challenges in front of us, moments that feel intimidating or unfair. But those moments can also be transformative. Being pressured to play that first song had been frightening, but it had revealed a part of herself she hadn't fully understood. It had shown her strength, courage, and a talent that could touch the hearts of others. She had learned that sometimes the pressure is not a punishment, is an invitation to grow, to shine, and to discover your true potential. As she sat at the piano one quiet evening, alone in the soft glow of the cafe lights, she reflected on how far she had come. The nervous girl who had hesitated, unsure of herself, was still there in some ways, but now she was accompanied by confidence, skill, and a sense of purpose. She understood that this was only the beginning. Her journey with music had just started, and there were countless songs, melodies, and stories waiting for her to uncover, and so she played. Not for the applause, not for recognition, but because it was who she was, because it was her way of expressing herself, connecting with others, and sharing a piece of her soul. The cafe once. Days turned into weeks, and the cafe began to feel like a completely different place. The waitress still moved quietly between tables, serving coffee and pastries with the same polite smile she had always carried, but the attention she received had changed. People didn't just notice her presence, they noticed her talent, her calm confidence, and the way she could transform a simple moment into something unforgettable. Patrons who had never spoken to her before would pause, curious, watching her move through the room. Some would even ask if she might play a little for them, hoping to catch just a glimpse of the music that had surprised everyone the first night. At first, she had been hesitant. The idea of playing again in front of people, performing when all eyes were on her, was still daunting. But she realized something important. Each time she played, it wasn't just about showing skill, it was about connecting. Music had a way of reaching people, of speaking to them in ways words never could. And that was a connection she wanted to nurture, one note at a time. Her days became a rhythm of work and practice. During quiet moments at the cafe, she would sit at the piano, fingers gliding across the keys, exploring melodies and harmonies she had never dared to play in public before. She discovered that she could lose herself completely in the music, letting it flow freely without worrying about mistakes or judgment. Each song told a story. Some were light and cheerful, others deep and haunting, but all of them carried a piece of her heart. One afternoon, a group of music enthusiasts came into the cafe, drawn by stories of her talent. They had heard about her performances through word of mouth and social media, and they wanted to see her play in person. She felt nervous as they gathered near the piano, strangers whose expectations weighed on her. But when she began to play, the anxiety melted away. The melody took over, and she played with a confidence that surprised even herself. The crowd was captivated. Some closed their eyes, swaying slightly to the rhythm, while others leaned forward, mesmerized by the intricate movements of her fingers. There was a depth to her playing that went beyond technical skill. It was emotional, personal, and sincere. Each note seemed to reach into the hearts of those listening, drawing them into a world of feeling and imagination. Even the skeptics, who had entered expecting a simple display of talent, found themselves moved by the performance. After the song ended, the applause was immediate and heartfelt. People approached her, offering compliments and asking questions. Some wanted to know how she had learned to play so well. Others simply wanted to express how much the music had touched them. She smiled politely, feeling a mix of pride and humility. For years, she had played in private, unsure of whether her music mattered to anyone outside her own world. Now she realized that it did. Her music could inspire, console, and connect. The man who had first encouraged her to play that night was there again. This time, he didn't need to press her or insist. He simply watched quietly as she played. His expression had softened over time. He was no longer just a curious patron. He had become a witness to her talent, someone who could appreciate the depth of her skill without needing to test it. He nodded once after the performance, a small gesture of acknowledgement and respect, and she returned to her tasks, feeling a quiet satisfaction. With each day that passed, more opportunities began to appear. A local music teacher, impressed by her natural ability, offered to give her lessons to refine her technique. Some patrons suggested that she perform at small local events, and others encouraged her to share her music online, so that a larger audience could experience it. At first, she felt overwhelmed by all the attention and possibilities. But slowly she began to see that these opportunities were gifts, chances to grow, and ways to explore the potential that had always been inside her. Her practice sessions became more deliberate and focused. She experimented with new styles, tried complex compositions, and even began to write her own pieces. The piano, once a quiet companion in private moments, became a partner in her journey of self-discovery. She learned patience, discipline, and the joy of creating something that could touch others. Each note she played was a reflection of her growth, not just as a musician, but as a person who had found the courage to share her inner world. One evening, after a long day at the cafe, she sat at the piano and reflected on how far she had come. The nervous girl who had first hesitated, unsure of her abilities, had transformed into someone who could step confidently into the spotlight and create magic with her music. She thought about the people who had listened to her, the faces filled with wonder, the silent moments of reflection, the heartfelt applause. She realized that her music had the power to change the atmosphere, to affect emotions, and to leave lasting impressions on everyone who heard it. The cafe itself had changed too. What had once been a simple place to enjoy coffee had become a space where people could experience art, beauty, and connection. Patrons came not only for the drinks and pastries, but for the chance to witness something extraordinary. The staff noticed the change as well. Other servers would pause to listen when she played, smiling and nodding in quiet appreciation. Even the kitchen staff, who had little interaction with her before, would peek over the counter to catch a few notes. The atmosphere of the cafe had shifted, and she had become its unexpected centerpiece. Despite the growing attention and praise, she remained humble. She didn't play for recognition or fame. She played because it felt natural and necessary, because music was a part of who she was. Every performance was personal, every note intentional, every melody a story she wanted to share. She had learned that music could communicate what words could not. It could express joy, sorrow, hope, and longing, all at the same time. And through it, she had discovered that people could connect deeply, even without speaking, through the shared experience of listening and feeling. One weekend, the cafe hosted a small local event, inviting musicians from the neighborhood to perform. She had been asked to play first, and although she felt nervous, she knew that this was an opportunity to step beyond the familiar walls of her daily routine. She arrived early, preparing herself, testing the piano, and letting the music settle in her mind. When the audience gathered, she took a deep breath and began. The performance was electric. The crowd was completely absorbed in her music. Some closed their eyes, swaying gently to the rhythm. Others watched in awe, unable to believe the talent that had emerged from such an ordinary setting. She played with both confidence and vulnerability, allowing her emotions to flow freely into the music. Each note carried a story, and the audience listened, transported by the beauty and sincerity of her playing. After the performance, the applause was overwhelming. People came up to congratulate her, some even asking if she had ever considered performing professionally. She smiled, feeling a mix of gratitude and humility. For the first time, she realized that her music had a life of its own, reaching beyond her private world and touching the hearts of others in ways she had never imagined. The nervous girl who had hesitated at the piano had become someone who could inspire and move people simply by being herself. The days that followed brought more recognition, but also more responsibility. She knew that she wanted to continue growing as a musician, to explore new compositions, new styles, and new ways to express herself. She accepted the guidance of her mentor, who helped her refine her technique and encouraged her to experiment with different forms of music. Every practice session, every performance, every small moment at the piano became part of her journey, shaping her into a more confident, skilled, and expressive artist. Through it all, she never forgot the first moment she had played in the cafe, the pressure she had felt, and the surprise of discovering her own hidden talent. She understood now that life often places challenges in front of us, moments that seem intimidating or unfair. But those moments can also reveal our true potential, showing us strengths we didn't know we had. The pressure had forced her out of her comfort zone, but it had also opened the door to a world she had always longed to explore, a world where her music could inspire, heal, and connect. One quiet evening, as she practiced alone in the cafe after closing, she reflected on how much had changed. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a musician, an artist, and someone who had learned to trust herself and her abilities. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey, for the people who had listened, encouraged, and supported her, and for the music that had become her voice. She knew that this was only the beginning, that there were countless melodies waiting to be discovered, and that her story was still unfolding, one note at a time. And as she played, the music filled the empty cafe. echoing through the quiet space and carrying with it the promise of what was to come. She had found her place, her purpose, and her passion. The piano, once just an instrument in the corner, had become a gateway to a world of endless possibilities. And with each performance, she continued to grow, inspire, and share the gift that had been hidden inside her all along. Time passed, and the young waitress who had once worked quietly behind the counter had become something entirely different. She was still at the cafe, still serving coffee and cleaning tables, but the air around her had changed. Patrons came not just for drinks and pastries, but for a glimpse of the music she could create. Her presence had transformed the cafe from an ordinary place into a space where moments of magic could happen, where music could fill hearts and linger long after the notes had faded. She had discovered something profound about herself, that a talent hidden for years could, with courage and opportunity, change not just her life, but the lives of those around her. Her journey had not been without challenges. Even after she had played for the crowd, even after her talent had been recognized, there were days when doubt crept back in. She wondered if she was truly ready to take the next step, if she could ever perform beyond the safe walls of the cafe. But each time she sat at the piano and let her fingers glide across the keys, that doubt faded. Music had a way of grounding her, of reminding her who she was and what she could do. It became her anchor, her source of strength, and the bridge between fear and courage. One morning, she arrived at the cafe to find an envelope on the counter. It had no name, only a simple message inside. Your music deserves to be heard by more than just those who come here. You have a gift. Don't keep it hidden? The message made her heart race. She realized that people outside the cafe had begun to notice her talent, that her music had reached farther than she had imagined. It was both thrilling and terrifying. She had always loved to play, but now she had a chance to share her music on a much larger scale, to reach an audience beyond her small corner of the world. That day, after finishing her shift, she sat at the piano as the cafe emptied. She let her fingers explore melodies she had only dreamed of playing publicly. The notes were full of emotion, some carrying joy, others melancholy, others hope. She poured her heart into the music, letting it tell the story of her journey from the shy, nervous girl who had first hesitated to the confident musician discovering her own power and voice. Each note was a reflection of her growth, her determination, and her courage. Word continued to spread. People from outside the neighborhood began to visit the cafe, hoping to hear her play. Local musicians reached out, suggesting collaborations and performances. Some offered opportunities to record her music professionally. She was both excited and overwhelmed. This was more than she had ever dreamed of, yet it was also a challenge she wasn't sure she was ready to face. But she knew one thing: she couldn't let fear stop her. She had already taken the first, most difficult step. She had shared her music when no one had expected her to. Every other step would be easier because of that. One evening, a small local music festival contacted her, inviting her to perform in front of a larger audience. The thought of playing outside the cafe, in front of strangers, made her stomach twist with nerves. But she also felt a thrill of anticipation. This was her chance to show the world the music she had carried quietly for so long. She agreed, determined to rise to the challenge. The day of the festival arrived, and she found herself standing backstage, the noise of the crowd echoing through the space. She could hear laughter, conversation, and the murmur of anticipation. She clutched the edge of the stage nervously, taking deep breaths to steady herself. Then she thought of the first night at the cafe, the nervous moment when she had been pressured to play, and how that single decision had changed everything. That memory gave her courage. She stepped forward, letting the applause guide her to the piano at center stage. As she sat down, the crowd fell silent and she pressed the first note. The sound filled the air, crisp and clear, reaching the ears of everyone in the audience. At first, she played softly, testing the space, letting her confidence grow with each passing measure. Then gradually the music blossomed. It flowed like a river, strong and gentle, carrying her emotions with it. Each note was deliberate, filled with meaning, and the audience was captivated. People leaned forward, listening intently. caught up in the beauty and authenticity of the performance. As the music continued, she felt a connection she had never experienced before. It was as if every person in the audience was part of the melody, sharing in the story she was telling through her hands. She played with everything she had, letting her fingers dance across the keys, expressing joy, sorrow, hope, and wonder all at once. The world beyond the stage faded away, leaving only the music, the piano, and the hearts of those listening. The performance reached its peak, a moment where every note, every chord, and every pause carried weight and emotion. She could feel the energy of the audience, their collective breath held in anticipation. And then, as the final note lingered and faded, the silence was profound. It was a silence filled with awe, with appreciation, and with the recognition of the beauty she had created. Slowly, the audience erupted in applause, cheers, and standing ovations. The sound was overwhelming, but it was also exhilarating. She had done it. She had shared her music with the world beyond the cafe, and the world had listened. After the festival, people approached her, offering congratulations, hugs, and words of admiration. Musicians and teachers expressed interest in collaborating, while listeners shared how deeply the music had moved them. She felt a sense of pride, yes, but also humility. She understood that this recognition wasn't the most important thing, the music itself, and the way it connected people was what mattered most. The applause, the attention, the praise, they were simply signs that she had touched hearts. Returning to the cafe after the festival, she noticed that nothing had changed outwardly, but everything had changed within her. She continued her daily work, serving coffee, cleaning tables, and greeting customers, but her heart was full. She had discovered not only her talent, but also her purpose. She had realized that music could take her places she had never imagined, and that sharing her gift could inspire others in ways that went beyond words. With this new understanding, she approached her music with renewed passion. She began composing her own pieces, creating melodies that spoke of her experiences, her hopes, and her dreams. Every practice session was an exploration, a chance to uncover something new within herself. She experimented with different styles, learned new techniques, and continued to push the boundaries of her abilities. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a voice, a confidant, and a partner in her journey of self-discovery. The patrons of the cafe noticed the change too. They were no longer just watching a talented waitress play. They were witnessing an artist in the making. People came from all over to hear her, to feel the magic she created with her music. Some brought friends, some recorded snippets to share, and some simply sat quietly, letting the notes wash over them. The cafe had become a place of community, connection, and inspiration, all because one young woman had found the courage to play. Through it all, she never lost her humility. She remembered the pressure, the nervousness, and the fear of that first night. She remembered how hesitant she had been, how unsure of herself, and how a single choice had opened the door to everything that followed. Those memories reminded her to stay grounded, to appreciate each moment, and to honor the gift she had been given. She knew that her journey was far from over, and that there would be more challenges ahead, but she also knew that she had the strength, talent, and determination to face them. One quiet evening, after a long day of work and practice, she sat at the piano in the cafe, alone. The lights were soft, casting a warm glow over the keys. She played a simple melody, one she had composed herself, and let it fill the empty space. As the notes floated through the air, she reflected on the journey she had taken from the shy waitress pressured to play, to the musician who had discovered her voice and shared it with the world. She realized that every step, every choice, and every moment of courage had led her here. She knew now that her music was more than just a personal passion. It was a bridge, a way to connect people, to bring joy, comfort, and inspiration. She had learned that hidden talents, when nurtured and shared, could transform lives. And she had discovered something even more important, that courage, even in the smallest form, could open doors to possibilities beyond imagination. As she played the last note, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The applause in her mind was not from others, but from herself, a recognition of her growth, her perseverance, and her courage. She had come a long way, and yet the journey continued. There were new melodies to explore, new audiences to reach, and new stories to tell through her music. And with each note, she would continue to share not just her talent, but her heart, her soul, and the beauty of the journey she had embraced. That night, she closed the piano gently and looked around the quiet cafe. The room was empty, but it held the echoes of every performance, every note, and every moment of courage she had ever experienced. She smiled, knowing that the music would never truly end, that it would continue to resonate in the hearts of those who had listened, and that her journey was only beginning. The waitress who had once been pressured to play had become a musician, an artist, and a storyteller. She had found her voice, and she would never let it be silenced.